Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Hello. My name is Paola. My last name is Saldivias Mendez. I use them both to honor father and mother. I am from Ecuador, Bolivia, and Peru. I am an Andean woman from the Andes. The title of my presentation, Starring at Peace Through the Teachings of My Abuelas, responds to my motivation of sharing creative ways for everyday peace, pun intended. I want to start my presentation with a question, and I would like to invite you all to participate with a show of hands. Have you ever heard someone ask, or have asked yourselves, what do you mean by peace? Or the sister question, what does peace look like? Some shy hands, yes, all right. Okay, so we have all heard these questions or some version of these questions. Thank you for participating. Today, I have a mission for my presentation, to awaken the profound knowledge that each of us hold to answer these questions and to remind us that the source of this wisdom is present in the ways we choose to live our lives every day. There are, of course, many ways of answering these important questions at a large scale and at smaller scales. Rotary is committed to answering these questions, and as Peace Fellows, we share that commitment. As a strategy to my mission today of awakening our pockets of wisdom, throughout my presentation, I will share with you my own experience tapping into the knowledge that I received from my ancestors, my abuelas, to find some answers. Let me start by introducing one valuable response offered by the Institute of Economics and Peace, or IEP. Understanding that peace is more than the absence of violence, this think tank presents us with the 8 pillars of positive peace to guide the efforts and commitments to create peaceful and flourishing societies. These 8 pillars, as you can see, are well-functioning governments, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relations with neighbors, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, and sound business environment. These pillars have reminded Rotary that what all their projects have in common is that ultimately they contribute to more peaceful societies. And that motivated the partnership between Rotary International and the IEP for the Rotary Peace Academy and the network of Rotary Peace Activators. At a policy level, this framework is immensely valuable. At a community level, it has the potential to reinforce our projects. And what about at a personal level? The 8 pillars of positive peace are an outward-looking framework. And as a Peace Fellow who understands that peace starts within, I felt curious about exploring a dimension that I feel is still missing, the inward integration of these pillars to foster positive peace in our lives for ourselves. How can the 8 pillars contribute to my life? How can they help me embody a peace builder identity? Exploring answers to these questions requires a lot of creativity. Fortunately, my abuelas, my grandmothers, and their ancestors taught me about creativity. Indigenous communities in the Andes are very creative in our agriculture, in the rituals of gratitude that we offer Pachamama, our Mother Earth, in our weavings. Our creativity is enriched by the relationships we have with the world around us. My favorite story of creativity involves the sky, the stars, and the constellations. You see, for the Andean cultures, the sky has information, and we receive it by observing the stars and the constellations. By observing the skies, the wise Andean elders knew when it was the right time for sowing and for harvesting. By interpreting the position of the stars, they knew the right time for celebration and the time for meditation. But of course, the sky is so vast. Look at it. They used their creativity and adjusted their perspective to take in the vastness of it. To observe the sky, instead of looking up, they looked down. They identified strategic places, built rock containers, and gathered water, which allowed them to look at the sky through the reflection of it in the water. We call their creation water mirrors. By looking at the reflection of the sky in the water, they would observe, study, and learn. This is my ancestral knowledge, and I embrace this creativity in my life. In the rest of the presentation, I will speak about the ways in which I wove together the ancestral knowledge of my abuelas with the knowledge that I've received of peace building. I looked at the 8 pillars of positive peace reflected in the waters of curiosity and self-awareness, and asked many questions as part of the process. Doing this exercise required me to pause, and in the fast-paced rhythm of our daily routine, where productivity takes priority, pausing is an act of courage. Let me show you how I looked at each pillar from a different perspective. I first looked at well-functioning government, and I asked myself, am I functioning well? Are my actions in harmony with my values? Do I have the clarity about my priorities? Am I living a life that I will be joyful to look back at 5 years from now? The answers that arrived resonated with a sense of accountability. Then I looked at equitable distribution of resources, and I thought, well, my resources are my time, my energy, my passion, and my commitment. Am I distributing them equitably in my life? Am I tending only to the urgent and neglecting the important? Am I making time and creating space for friends and family, for work, for community, for myself? The answers resonated with a sense of balance. When reflecting on good relationships with neighbors, I contemplated how readily I am to be present for others, to lend a hand, or perhaps a listening ear. But do I know how to reach out when I need support? Do I know how to ask for help, for a listening ear, for a kind heart? I thought about vulnerability. Embracing my abuela's knowledge, I looked at the 8 pillars of positive peace and reflected on them from another perspective. Each question represented a new star, and I asked questions, and I also reflected about the people in my life, and I thought about the experiences I've lived. Each thought represented a new star, and constellations are formed by the connections of the stars. So I connected the questions and the people and the experiences, and gradually they started forming my constellations of peace. The pillars of peace morphed into my constellations of accountability, balance, and vulnerability. Reflecting on the acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, and free flow of information formed the constellations of self-compassion, resilience, and inner dialogue. When I thought about high levels of human capital, I thought about some of the brilliant people in my life. My fellow fellows, my sister, my niece Isabella, who, by the way, has been the designer of the background that you see in the slide. She researched about the fabrics from the countries of all of our fellows from cohorts 22 and 23 and created this digital collage for the presentation. If my capital is my mind, my skills and my abilities, the ways in which I show up for my community, and the ways in which I show up for the work that I do, I ask myself, in what ways am I showing up for myself? How much value am I giving myself? This constellation formed self-worth. The last pillar is sound business environment. And I'd like to invite you all to just take a moment and pay attention to what comes to your mind when you think about this pillar. When you hear the name of the pillar, sound business environment, who comes to your mind? What experiences are coming back to you right now? Just take a moment with these thoughts. Make sure to take a mental note. If you have a pen in hand, maybe jot it down. And I invite you all to come back to this information afterwards and hold that thought, because that is your interpretation of this pillar. And it can be a starting point for you to explore your own stories with peace. For sound business environment, I thought, if business is about transaction, what are the transactions in my life? And what is the currency I am using for these transactions? Time, joy, service. Where am I allocating this currency? And who is investing in their currency of wisdom, patience, mentorship in me? I found the constellation of community. This reflection exercise is something that I designed as part of my experience in the fellowship, and I called it My Peace Constellations, telling my stories of peace, with the purpose of motivating more social entrepreneurs like me and community builders like us to creatively think about how they can embrace their peace builder identity by using the prompt, Constellations Tell Stories. What are your stories of peace? Just like my abuelas used the constellations as a guide, my own constellations are a guide to embrace my peace builder identity. I have expanded my stories of peace with constellations of gratitude, justice, and trust. And trusting that I was successful today with my mission of reminding you that you have the knowledge in your everyday life and the life of those you learn from, not only to answer questions about peace, but to nurture your peace builder identity by choosing daily what are the stories of peace you want to tell. I would like to close my presentation with a reminder and an ask from you. Remember, you have received so many stories of peace from all of us today, and hopefully some of them will become stars in your constellations. My ask for you today is to pause and give yourselves the space to reflect about who are the stars in your constellations. These are my mom, my sister, and the famous designer Isabella. And they are for sure part of my constellations. Who are those people in your life that remind you to be kind and compassionate? Who holds you accountable? Let them know. There is something very powerful about knowing that you are the peace in someone else's life. Gracias.